So it's important here to understand or understand as I say what I'm saying here. Let me bring this up a little bit. It's just like leaving an apple outside after you've cut into it and broke off the shell. It starts to turn brown, okay? And it starts to putrefy. So what this is about then is this is about how can you encapsulate this spagyric rosemary, keep it inside of something until it gets somewhere else. And this is what I was thinking about last night. My good friends, I was thinking, if we're traveling, where are we going? Like, and this is me putting myself in the stage of the masses because I already know where I'm going. Everywhere. But putting myself in the stage of the masses, I said, man, if we're traveling, where are we going? Why would you travel? And then I send the ping up, ping. And then I get a ping back. It said, because anyone that travels is surely going somewhere, generally as cargo. It's the Argo cargo that we're traveling through certain stage of consciousness to arrive somewhere. Something is actually expecting us. And we need to really, really tune in to understanding how to manifest that as a balanced, harmonic experience for us. This is what we call the future, right? Because as you see it now, according to if things keep taking place like they're taking place now, nobody says anything, you know, all the people just shy back away from it, don't want to lose their millions of dollars even though they can live off 200,000 of it, and then it just keeps playing, it's not their responsibility, then we're still traveling though. You see what I mean? And who's driving? Because like I'm on the ship and I'm a good driver, so I'm at least going to go up and see if I can drive. Like all the things are relative to me. I want to know, well, what is my job? You know, if we're all working together, like first of all, who is we're and who is they? And like who's in charge here? Who's in command? You know, and I'm on Google, who's in command? And it's the command, and it's Viking command. And Smith Kane doesn't even talk to his kids, and there's quarrels and fights and bickerings and stuff going on. Everyone's in the prison state of mind or in the prism state of mind. There's groups and cliques, angles and motivations and all of this kind of stuff going on. Meanwhile, the children who are us, the biorhythmic vessels that are filling up our divided souls from just like a big Acer and big Tiamat, when they split up, then all their little pieces inside of us, we get this zodiac body, this wheel-based tin man with his cogs all broken, rusted out, your facets all broken, somebody then plunder your jewel in your leg, you're walking with the crook, you can't even see straight, your third eye is blind and so shut, because everything that you put in your mouth actually promotes a frequency that actually keeps everything closed in fear inside of a broken shell. As you keep, every time you come out cracking and beating on somebody else's and they beat back, and then you guys go back in retreating, and then meanwhile there's a sinister laugh because the harmonics of this planet are beautiful, not were beautiful. Get the difference, meaning that no matter what we are doing here, it doesn't stop the symphony. Like there, it just, and that was the major key. Thank you. The major key was I figured out why this was going to keep going, why it was allowed to continue, and it was based.
So here's the DNA. It does this double helix little slinky thing, and you get this ratio of the long wave to the short wave in the DNA. That's ultraviolet, and yet your DNA is comprised of sound waves coming from your heart, which is bliss or euphoria. The sound wave is the long wave, it's the envelope, the wave on the wave, the carrier wave in ratio to the envelope. The answer lies folded in an envelope. So here's what happens mechanically. You're there, your heart's singing, you're feeling passion, there's a sonic ponytail, a phonon wave, that mechanically braids your DNA like a snake charmer. Da, 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 right? And so your DNA responds to coherent sound from the heart, like your thymus is a catcher's mitt. and won't shrivel if there's bliss. Yeah? And so the sound of your heart and the bliss coming from your heart cause your DNA to know how to braid. Braiding DNA is emotion the weaver. Yes, emotion controls the braid of DNA, and therefore which RNA is exposed. And therefore emotion is the programmer for DNA. You see? We know that emotion programs DNA. You get depressed, you get a cold. The virus is DNA. The new information is how. The how is that this low-frequency, long-wave sound coherence, the phonon ponytail of the heart, creates a braiding algorithm which creates this compression wave to implode in your DNA. In German, bliss is called Glückseligkeit. Yes? Do I have that correct there, dear? I do? See? Thank you, dear. So Glückseligkeit comes from, I'm sure I haven't pronounced it right, though, have I? Oh, okay, thank you. So selig means to have a soul, selig. Selige? Yeah? And Glückseligkeit means to have bliss. So to have bliss contains the idea of having a soul. In other words, you don't get a soul if you didn't get bliss. And that's the physics. The physics actually is that your DNA is not mechanically ignited unless you're able to have bliss or passion. So the ignition of your DNA is dependent upon locating your passion. If you don't, you're toast. Now, that gets to, we spend a whole day on this in the weekend when we talk about the extraterrestrial origin of DNA. And we tell a very colorful fairy tale about ETs, Anunnaki, and Draco, and it's very colorful, and it's just like very entertaining. But you don't even need the fairy tale to get to the bottom line. The bottom line is simple. When the ancestors who came here to do the genetic engineering, which we call the Bible, they came here because their DNA had fallen, the Nephilim. How did the DNA fall? It was very simple. They lost passion, the ability to create glandular juices to get the stuff to grab a hold of your DNA like a tornado and make it implode and spin. So to leverage your DNA is a three-dimensional, shape-shifting slinky worm, right? And so what happens is in the presence of bliss, your DNA goes from to this. A double helix, right? So that braiding algorithm creates a compression wave, the toroidal DNA, Lord of the Rings, and what happens is then your DNA starts imploding. And that implosion, the fire in the center, makes DNA like a, you ever see a jellyfish suck itself along in the ocean? The fire in the center is sucking magnetism through the speed of light in the center, and that's what enables the DNA to become self-steering. It's the physics of artificial intelligence. So in effect, the DNA cannot steer itself and gets dizzy if you do not set it free. Literally dizzy. That's why the wheat and corn and soy that's been monocultured for 1,000 years, the DNA is pissed off, it's angry. That's why it makes mucus. Because it can't self-steer if you don't set it free. You don't set the character in your own dream free, you don't learn from them, right? So degrees of freedom in magic and chemistry have the same meaning. The amount by which you can learn something new from the reaction is the degrees of freedom you give it. So all of this has to do with our ancestral origin. They came here looking for a heart of gold, and they were growing old. Looking for a heart of gold. No? So what happened is, when you lose passion or bliss, your DNA begins to decay as a wave. Yeah? And so you lose a soul. And so if you don't have a heart of gold in mean ratio, then in fact you lose this leverage to ignite your DNA. And the ignition of DNA is the storal to the mori. It's the bottom line. It's the happily ever after. So we do this whole song and dance, and we end up with a homework assignment. The homework assignment we do in detail on the weekend is, well, if we supposing we were to take this relatively seriously and say, I guess without bliss, DNA will never be sustainable. That means immortality depends upon bliss. Simple physics. Therefore, no one could argue bliss is the purpose of having DNA, and therefore bliss is the purpose of having a government. Any argument? No? Good. So we've agreed on a political platform, have we? Excellent, excellent. So now we know what to serve at McDonald's, right? So in order to have a government, you have agreement. Agreement is a model for implosion. So in fact, if you knew what people were for, you could make decisions. 4-year-old girl looks up at astrophysicist PhD father and says, "Dad, am I going to become a star?" You know what the answer is? Yes. Right? So that's the physics. When you walk into McDonald's and the waitress says, "Enjoy your hamburger," would you like chemotherapy with that? No, I don't. No. When the waitress says, "Enjoy your hamburger," what she really means is develop that into the charged radiance which will then serve the gene pool. Isn't that what your waitress at McDonald's? It's another way of walking home from the cappuccino bar and asking yourself, have I harvested any memory for the galactic core today? When you find a way for a wave to become shareable, it becomes immortal. So this is the way it works. Your doctor says...
Choosing compassion carefully aligns
Source consciousness manifests and sustains all life. The nature of prime consciousness, transmitted from the benevolent heart of creation, as the male and female tantric potencies of creation, energetically manifests as electricity and magnetism. This creation code is downloaded into the human biocomputer via the delivery system of circuitry. Due to the genetic modification of the human DNA and the psychosocial, chemical, and religious manipulation of consciousness, major circuits within this system have been disconnected. The disconnection of human biocircuitry has led to a deficient supply of electromagnetic, life-sustaining energy that has resulted in humanity's limited capacity to activate and express the full spectrum of its divine immortal blueprint. The deprivation of this most elementary life force energy system has reduced humanity to a conflict-driven, mortal race, collectively manifesting a fear-based paradigm. The reconnection of individual human biocircuitry will establish a fully sentient, resonant harmonic to be transmitted into the unified field of collective consciousness. Once critical mass has been reached, the transformation of the morphogenetic field will be realized. The full spectrum of creation frequencies broadcast through a multitude of reactivated units of human circuitry will subvert corrupt archetypal references and facilitate the redefinition of God in the human psyche. As form follows frequency, the collective waveform of a newly calibrated human race will break through the confines of this mortal prison and generate a model of existence that reflects the full spectrum of the divine blueprint embedded in the human matrix. The reconnection of biocircuitry will ultimately recalibrate the frequency of the individual and collective human race to the cosmogenic order of its solar system and to its true divine identity as an immortal race able to access any time or energy level in the universe. The template model's prime purpose is the reconnection of human biocircuitry.